Plano Wildcat Band. We have a long history and many great traditions. If you've been through summer band camp, you've already learned a lot about our traditions. And maybe you've been curious, where do these traditions come from and how far back do they go? Well, Plano has a long history, and over the years we've built traditions around football games, around making music, and around supporting our school and building our identity. Some of the traditions are relatively new, and some are really old, older than most other high schools in Texas. And all these traditions are important because they tie our community together, the past, the present, and the future. Now, the Plano Senior High campus is only about 50 years old, but it has a legacy that goes all the way back to 1903. Plano was founded in 1873 and set up public schools in 1881. The Plano Wildcats football team goes back to 1900, one of the 10 oldest high school programs in Texas. But it wasn't until 1903 that the first permanent schoolhouse was built. All 12 grades went to school there. The entire school district was in one building. This building was nicknamed the Spanish School because of its architecture. Unfortunately, it burned down in 1924. So a new school was built using the bricks of the old Spanish school. It also housed all 12 grades until 1952 when an elementary school, now called Mendenhall, was opened. This building is now called the Cox Building, and it holds the Plano ISD Administrative Office and the Cox Playhouse in the basement. The old gymnasium next door, there on the left, is now the Courtyard Theater. By the 1960s, Plano was growing quickly. In 1962, Plano High School moved to a new building, what we now know as Williams High School. The old building became Cox Junior High. But within a few years, the Plano population really exploded. So in 1975, Plano Senior High was opened. It looks more like a junior college campus than a high school, but Plano was still growing. And as we know, Plano's growth would continue for decades. Plano is now over 100 times larger than it was in the 1950s. Plano East opened in 1981 and Plano West in 1999. Each great high schools in their own right and a credit to our city and our schools. But we are the Wildcats, with a history going back to 1900. We are the old school, and we carry that heritage with us proudly. Pesh and West are great schools, but we are Plano. The earliest reference I could find to a Plano high school band is 1914. Unfortunately, the public library is missing most of the yearbooks between 1915 and 1943, so we're not sure what was going on during those years. We do know that Plano had a Chamber of Commerce band, like a community band with students and adults, during the 1920s. But by 1943, when the yearbooks start again, there was no official band program. What we had in the 1940s was a pep squad, an all-girl group that marched up and down the field with drummers and twirlers, but no horns, so not really a band. It was part drum corps and part drill team, but there were no brass instruments or woodwinds. High school bands were still not common in North Texas, especially in small towns. McKinney High School had a permanent band back then, but they were a much larger town than Plano at that time. In 1950, 3 eighth graders, each of whom had a father on the school board, went to a meeting to ask for funds to start a school band program. One of these students was Carolyn Carpenter, who was later selected as Plano's first drum major. I talked with her a couple of months ago, and she told me about the first official band.
No, I never was in the pep squad. I didn't want to be in the pep squad.
Okay.
They didn't do anything except just march up and down the field and beat the different cadences. I was along with other people ready to hear music rather than the drum beat. In my classroom, we saw 3 of us happened to have dads on the school board. Haggard and Rice and Carpenter. Well, Mr. Sigler wasn't too interested in it because he didn't have the budget for it. I said, they're tough because once it got going, it gained momentum, and there was never any question about it after that.
Plano's first band director was a man named Bill Jones, who was still a student at SMU at the time. He came up to Plano and worked with the new band, playing and marching, until he felt they were ready to march in a parade. But they had no uniforms, so they purchased some generic white coveralls like you'd use to paint a house, and they had them embroidered with a Wildcat logo. Carolyn has donated this uniform, the original Plano Band uniform, to be added to our band display case. By the way, her sons, John and Joe Neely, were both in the Plano Band in the 1980s, probably the first multi-generational family in Plano Band history. By the end of the 1951 school year, the band had proper uniforms, and Carolyn has also donated her original drum major uniform for our display case. Bill Jones was a strict teacher of military-style marching. Think of the Texas A&M Aggie Band. But in 1952, a new director was hired, John McDonald, and he brought more showmanship to the band. Baton twirlers from the pep squad were included, and the band introduced other popular marching techniques of the time, like shape formations. Can you tell what this shape is? It's called the sailboat. And this one? It's called the tank. Can you make out the shape of a tank? Well, ironically, football games were played at Tiny Rice Field in downtown Plano back then, which is gone now, and it only held a few hundred people. It was only 6 or 8 rows tall, so it really wasn't possible to get high enough in the bleachers to make out what the shapes were. But they could do something that isn't possible these days. They had a routine where the band attached lights to their uniforms and instruments, turned off the stadium lights, and performed their halftime show in the dark. The lights at Clark Stadium take nearly 20 minutes to turn on, so that's no longer practical. Plano's first long-term band director was Emmett Clem, who led the Wildcat Band for 20 years from 1956 to 1976. He was the perfect small-town band director, always working to support the community. And under his leadership, the Plano Band also became nationally recognized, playing at several televised Dallas Cowboy games in their first seasons. In 1976, the band traveled to Washington, D.C., and appeared on the steps of the Capitol building. This was during the bicentennial. Does anybody remember the bicentennial? There was a lot of things going on in New York and Washington for the 200th birthday of America, but there were some things going on in Plano as well. We had a big parade downtown, and the street that Plano Senior High sits on, Independence Parkway, was actually renamed. Plano's next long-term director was Charles Fork. He was already well known around the state before coming to Plano, having run the band at Baytown Lee High School. He had written a book on marching concepts and then co-authored several method books that are still in use today. Charles was also a personal friend of trumpet legend Doc Severinsen, who played concerts with the Plano Band each year for nearly 15 years. Like Emmett Clem, he believed a high school band's top priorities should be to provide a well-rounded music education while serving the community, values that still guide our program today. Al Corley led the Plano Band through the 1990s. After his stint in Plano, he became band director at Texas State University in San Marcos. An impressive career. He's still around and still a great Plano fan. Jeremy Condrat led the band from 2001 to 2015, the first Plano Senior High graduate to return as director, but not the last. His experience as a student under Charles Fork and as an assistant under Al Corley has given our program a rare continuity. Jeremy is now coordinator of instrumental music for the Plano ISD. Which brings us to your current leader, Jason Lewis. The The Plano Band is doing great things under Jason, and I know you're all excited for what's coming this school year. We must, of course, also recognize Jacob Dewald, the assistant band director, who is another Plano Senior High grad who came back to direct the bands. And last but not least, Mr. Michael Hernandez, who has been teaching band at the senior high since 1991. That's 33 years. I'm pretty sure that's some kind of record. Here's a timeline of several of the things we've just talked about. The school board approving the band program in 1950, the Dallas Cowboys performances in the 1960s, the visit to Washington in the 70s, and of course, the Doc Severinsen concerts. Moving forward toward the 21st century, we have our marching percussion performing at an international percussion convention in 1998. We have the National Wind Band Honors, where the wind ensemble was named national winner. The Grammy Signature School Gold Award presented to the entire senior high music department, not once, but twice. And the Essential Ellington Festival at Lincoln Center in New York, where our jazz ensemble was ranked one of the top 15 in the nation. Again, not once, but twice. And we'll cap it all off with the wind ensemble's performance last spring in Indianapolis for Music for All, a great feather in our cap. Let's talk about our traditional songs. Our alma mater, or school song, is called Dear Plano High School. It was written in 1956 by Emmett Clem. Plano's first alma mater was called Dear Plano High and was set to an old tune called Sweet Adeline. But in 1956, Emmett composed a new tune and wrote new words. It's a great school song, and it's way better than Sweet Adeline. And it's important not just because it was written for us, but because it was written by one of our own, ours and only ours. During football pregame, we often say our fight song is ours and only ours. That's because almost every other high school borrows their fight song from a college. We don't. The tune to our fight song is taken from a not very famous march written in 1910 by Carl King. But the words were written by Jessie Vance Maltsby, probably in the 1920s when she was a Plano High School student, or possibly later when her husband was on the school board. Again, written by our own, ours and only ours. So, if you've done the math now, you'll realize that we had a school song and a fight song for like 15 years before we even had a band. Before pep rallies were moved to the gymnasium, they were held in the third floor study hall of the Cox building with the cheerleaders standing on that little stage and all the music provided by a piano. It's a lot better with a band, don't you think? This is the earliest recording of the Plano Band that I've come across. It's from 1965, after the high school had moved to Williams. It was made at the state championship pep rally in 1965. The record title there, it says Plandemonium. I'll play a little bit of this for you, and you'll hear that pep rallies are pretty much the same as they were in 1965. While we're talking about 1965, let's look at the yearbook and see what the Plano Band was doing that year to keep itself busy. First, they presented a concert for the dedication of the new City Hall with Governor John Connally as the guest speaker. Then they marched in the Cotton Bowl for a Dallas Cowboys game, which was nationally televised. Then they provided background music for a film called The Plano Story, which was also to be seen on television. That documentary is actually on YouTube, the whole thing. You can find a link down in the comments, and it actually starts with the dedication of City Hall. After that, they went to marching contest. They played during a televised high school game of the week. They, again, more marching contest. They marched to the Cotton Bowl for an SMU Arkansas football game. I don't know why SMU and Arkansas couldn't handle that, but they needed some Plano help. They did the Christmas parade. They did all region. They played in the state championship game, of course, and went to solo and ensemble. So pretty busy times. March Grandioso, written by some guy way back when, and why do we play it? Well, this one is a tradition that we borrowed from the colleges, the UT Longhorn Band, and also the Texas Tech Raider Band. They've been doing it for decades, but so have we. We've been playing it for over 40 years at our stadium entrance and at the end of the third quarter, and then we play a little snippet of it every time we get a first down. There's a lot of Grandioso. It's a really ingrained tradition, and to tell you just how much a tradition Grandioso is, at Charles Fork's funeral in 2005, a band made up of his former students played several songs. We played, sweet and sad things like you'd play at a funeral, but at the end of the service, they carried his casket down the aisle to March Grandioso, and the audience put their paws in the air and clapped along. It was magic. The Plano Fanfare was written in 2006. Jeremy Condrat asked me to write a pregame fanfare, and I'm really flattered that it has become a tradition. It also includes the This Is Our Fight Song intro. And again, I'm very honored and flattered that it still gets the crowd fired up after 18 years. And we have lots of other traditions, like the Thunderbones and the Twilight Concert, the drumline competition, the homecoming parade, and many more. Here's what Jeremy Condrat has to say about what makes the Plano Band special.
The other thing that I think makes Plano Senior High just really, really unique is that since I think the foundation that Charles Fork established was that the band is there for the community. And I know that's something that's become a part of who I am as a musician and as a director, is that music is meant for the community, and it's supposed to support the community. And when you go and you see the Plano Senior High School marching band on Friday nights, there's always a connection with the audience. That's the goal, is to make sure that halftime is something that the audience understands and can connect with. And so I think that whatever, if it's the jazz band or the percussion section or the marching band or the symphony orchestra, the goal has always been community first and kids first. And when you do all the right things, and the quality is really high and everybody's inspired, then great things happen.
And that brings us to here and now. Now you're a part of it. It's your turn to make history in a good way, okay? So be proud when you take that field, and remember that generations of Plano fans love what you do, and that the next generation of the Plano Band is out there looking up to you. And imagine that thousands of Plano Band alumni are marching with you every step, cheering you on. In fact, some of us will literally be marching with you at homecoming, which is another great tradition started in 2016 by Jason Lewis. Our pride lasts a lifetime, and we're all better because of what we learned in band. And some pretty impressive people have been members of the Plano Band. Let me introduce you to three of them. General Eric Smith was drum major in 1983, and he is now the highest ranking officer of the United States Marine Corps. Kendall Demarest, class of 2011, is a senior music editor at Disney Animation Studios. And Brandon Lloyd, class of 2004, is flight director at NASA, managing the International Space Station. Historically speaking, you all have a big year coming up. It's the 50th anniversary of Plano Senior High and also the 75th anniversary of the Plano Band. I don't know what's in store yet, but it's a great time to be here, and on behalf of all Plano Band alumni, we wish you the best. I hope you all build the kind of amazing memories that I did. The Plano Band gave me amazing opportunities, and I'm honored to have the chance to give a little something back. But now it's your turn. Get out there, be proud of your history, have the time of your life, and make us proud.